welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning, and it's time to review activities in the AFEX commodities market for the weekend, 28th of June, 2021. A look at the summary now shows that total value traded, number of contracts and deals were all in the red. The week under consideration. Michael Martins, now portfolio manager with AFEX, is here to tell us more. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Laddie. Good morning.
Good morning.
For having me once again.
Great to have you. Well, it's the end of the second quarter. Can you give us an overview of how well the commodities market has performed from start of the season till date?
So, yes, the commodities market is done extremely well this year. But just before we even go into that, let's just take a look over what happened over the course of this week with the commodities market. So if you look at the data in front of you with the commodities market summary, there was about a 79.36% decline in the total value of transactions traded on the exchange, which fell from 1.01 billion to close the week at just 227 million naira in the total value traded. With the total number of contracts for the week, we also saw red, with the value falling by 71.64% from around 27,781 contracts to close the trading week at 7,880 contracts. The total number of deals also fell by 35.19%, falling from 54 deals to 35 deals. The AFEX Commodities Index, which is the ACI, however, saw a slight increase of 2.58% from around 460 index points to close the trading week at 471.88 index point. The AFEX Export Index also saw green in the week under consideration, going up slightly by 1.58%. from around 169.09 index points to close the trading week at 171.77 index points. With regards to the volume of transactions on the exchange, we generally saw a decline across board, from one commodity to the other. The only exception that we saw in the week under consideration was paddy rice, which went up from 696 contracts to close the trading week at 2,630 contracts. With regards to price changes on the exchange, we saw a fair bit of activity with the top gainers being first, with the first of the top gainers being soybean, which went up by 3.59% to close the trading week at just over 34,000 naira per contract. We also saw the price of sorghum go up by 3.47% to close the trading week at just over 24,000 naira per contract. Ginger also went up by 2.84% to close the trading week at just over 111,000 naira per contract. Maize also went up by 2.36% to close the trading week at 23,983 naira per contract. Paddy rice also went up by 1.86% to close the trading week at just under 23,000 naira per contract. And last but not least, with the top gainers, we had cashew, which went up by 1.62% to close the trading week at 45,407 naira per contract. With the losers, we essentially just had two, which would be sesame and cocoa, which fell by 5.16% and 0.09% respectively. And lastly, we have the fair trade exchange traded commodity, which went up slightly over the course of the week by 0.98% to close the trading week at 14,360 naira per contract. With regards to how well commodities market has done this season, I think the commodities market has done significantly well. I believe they've done significantly well. So just to put a few numbers to the narrative, maize has done approximately 53.25% from start of season till date. Soybean has been on fire, to which it has gone up by more than 74% from start of season till date. Paddy rice has not done too well in comparison, to which it has only gone up by 13.86% from start of season till date. Sorghum and ginger have also gone up by more than 50% from start of season till date. I think that generally indicates a bullish market all around with this year's commodities market. And it would show a bit of an anomaly, though, because what we tend to see in the commodities market is the fact that in any 4-year commodity cycle, you tend to see, commodities prices sort of give you like an average return over like a 3-year period, and then you have a bullish market happening in the 4th year. But what we have seen in recent time is the fact that for the past 2 years, the commodities market has essentially been bullish, right? So we saw this similar numbers happen last year with maize, soybean, and paddy rice going up by more than 50% across board, and we are seeing similar numbers this year across the commodities market.
So, what in your view is driving this bullish sentiment?
Thank you very much for that question. So I think, by and large, what has driven the commodities market to sort of behave in this pattern, which is sort of different from what we have seen historically, is the fact that certain macroeconomic factors are now sort of different, or at the very least, they are changing more frequently than we expect them to. So in the past couple of years, the major drivers have been the exchange rate, which has changed significantly over the past 4 years, and also would be the inflation rate, which is of course significantly high, as we currently have it. Some of the other drivers for the current season that we are in would be the COVID-19 restrictions that happened last year, which affected production, which slightly affected production, but more so from a processor standpoint. So some companies that were unable to process significant numbers last year are now currently doing so and ramping up production, which of course then feeds into the demand that we are having in the commodities market. Part of it would also be the willingness of, let's say, the federal government and by extension the central bank, to sort of intervene in the market to help stabilize prices with what we then currently have with the strategic grain reserve. So it is the case that we are having a lot of these macroeconomic factors change. And we are having them change more frequently than we had previously expected. Them to.
All right, so, with the various production challenges plaguing the country currently, the state of food security has become heightened, and the next food season seems to look bleak. And that's why we're going to be discussing now the agricultural production progress with Michael Martin here. So how is the 2021 wet season production going?
So I think I believe the production for these years is going as well as can be expected. So there are a few factors that are different, that are occurring this year that are slightly different from what we had last year. So the first of which would be the availability of fertilizer. So last year, because of COVID-19 and a bit of the lockdown situation that we had in the country, we didn't have as much availability of fertilizer, and that was one. And secondly, the distribution was sort of skewed, meaning that it wasn't readily available across board. But that is not the case this year. There has been a significant supply of fertilizer into the commodities market, meaning that farmers are now able to cultivate whatever proportion that they want to cultivate for this year, using quality inputs. Another issue this year that we are seeing has also been that that fertilizer is now spread across board, meaning that it's now essentially available. Another factor that we are seeing play out this year, which of course feeds significantly into farmers' ability to cultivate for the year, is rainfall. So aside from the fact that rainfall this year started a bit later than we had expected them to, they have been the rains have been falling in sufficient numbers, at least from the last week of May up until now. So for the past 4 weeks, we have seen that rainfall number slide up significantly. So which that means that we can expect to see a higher number of cultivation happen this year in comparison to the previous year. I mean, if we were to take our own input disbursement program as a bit of a proxy for the entire cultivation market, last week you had mentioned doing only about 18,000 farmers. This week we're already up to more than 25,000 farmers, which then sort of indicates that farmers are now more willing to cultivate. Are now more willing to cultivate, which would essentially lead into higher production numbers for this year. So I don't think, from a food security standpoint, with regards to production, I don't think we would have anything to worry about with regards to farmer cultivating sufficient numbers. Yeah.
Well, that sounds really good and comforting because sometimes when we talk of food security, we also look at the security situation in the country, and with all the inflation and the constraints and then the pandemic. So are you saying that all this will not have any impact on production at the end of the day?
I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they would have little to no effect on production numbers for this year. So if you take the insecurity issue for one, so first off, we had COVID-19 last year, which sort of prevented the movement of people and goods from one place to another. We don't have that same scenario this year. And also from an insecurity standpoint, you would find that a lot of that insecurity sort of tends to happen around urban areas and then quasi-urban regions, and not necessarily the rural areas where farmers are sort of situated. So meaning that farmers have by and large not been prevented from going to their farm to sort of cultivate. Another thing that might have been an issue this year was rainfall, to which I had mentioned earlier that they were a bit late, but then they have been sufficient over the past couple of weeks. So in comparison, I don't think that there's going to be any sort of significant impact with those three macroeconomic factors. I don't think there's going to be any sort of significant impact on the production numbers for this year.
All right, so also noticed that rains came a little late this year. What impact do you believe this can have on production?
So at the late rainfall, as it sustained itself, we might have seen a significant impact on input disbursement, because this is what essentially tends to happen with any sort of cultivation timeline. Farmers would essentially wait for the first rain to come before they then begin to start sourcing for inputs to sort of help them cultivate. So at the rain sort of delayed any longer than they already have, we would have seen a significant impact on cultivation and of course the eventual effect on the production numbers. But like I said, that's not what happened this year. They were a bit late, but they have been sufficient over the past couple of weeks, meaning that the cultivation numbers are going to go up. More farmers are going to cultivate this year. And it's also the case that because of inflation, right, we're going to have it might be the case that we would have higher competitive prices this year at harvest in comparison to last year, meaning that farmers can then, cultivate with the expectation that they're going to get a higher, price for whatever commodity that they cultivate at harvest. So I think those two factors will sort of help mitigate against the late rainfall for this year.
And given your review so far, how can you compare this year to previous production season, like last year?
So just taking the meteorological data that we have from NIMET as a proxy. So the data that we have sort of essentially suggests that the rainfall numbers that we would have this year would be similar to the numbers that we had last year. And so if you were to take account of the fact that last year had a bit of restrictions with regards to COVID-19, and that this year doesn't have the same restrictions, I think that we're going to see a slightly higher production numbers this year in comparison to last year. And it's also the case that because we've had higher competitive commodity prices for the past 2 or 3 years, it's also the case that cultivation has been significantly profitable for smallholder farmers in the past 2 or 3 years. So that in itself builds in a fair degree of optimism into this year's cultivation, meaning that a lot more farmers are now anticipating higher prices, which would essentially lead into higher production numbers for the year. So I think by and large, the year 2021 would have a higher higher production numbers in comparison to last year 2020.
So you do expect this bullish sentiment to run through the third quarter of the year?
No, certainly not. Right. So what we tend to see, like I have said a lot of times during the course of this show, is the fact that that price will tend to start sort of depreciating over the third quarter, I believe. And that's partly due to the fact that a lot of the focus right now, especially for smallholder farmers and every other participant in the commodities ecosystem, is actually on input disbursement and cultivation. And of course, the expectation would then be to say, can we wait till the middle of July rather to sort of have a sense of what this year's production number would be before we then start making any sort of anticipation about where prices are going to end up. But to essentially answer your question, I think that prices are essentially going to rise for the next couple of weeks before they then significantly correct in expectation of this year's harvest. So I don't think that the bullishness is going to continue to the end of the third quarter. Best case scenario, you're going to see the bullishness continue till the month of July, and then you're going to see a massive price correction in the month of August and September.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts with us on AFEX Commodities Updates. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.